It's lying awake all night thinking, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? That horrible feeling of being awake at night with your stomach twisting in knots, is, I'm sure it happens in other professions too, but I think we deal with it on a far more regular basis.
An elder once told me, he said, you know, the space where the darkness begins and the light ends is the realm of the warrior. And that when we are seeking new knowledges and new ways to grow, that's where we need to be standing, is right at that edge.
For me, the biggest moment of anxiety in this whole process was at the very beginning. You've got a comfortable place, you've got a good job, you know, you're on the path that you're supposed to be at, the house, the picket fence, however you want to put it. And then you leave that to go into an area of research which is somewhat overwhelming. People think you're crazy.
I went to England when I was 18 years old. The biggest risk that you take when you decide to do something like that, I see it as time away from people that you love.
When I first landed in Canada, it was minus 44. And I was just coming from a place where it was plus 44. I hadn't even arrived at U of A then. I said, I'm going back home. You know what? It's not worth it. It's minus 44. It's so windy, like you can't even see your fingers.
I think a lot of academics worry about being perceived as being a fraud. You don't know enough. You haven't studied enough, haven't read enough, haven't read enough reports. So, it might be in a committee, it might be in the classroom, it might be presenting a paper. So niggling at the back of your mind is the thought that you're not quite up to it.
One guy I know, who's my sort of model, he tells me he doesn't sleep the night before classes start. And he has a really funny way of putting it. He said he's afraid Aristotle will be in the class. Aristotle's going to be sitting in the back row. He's going to understand everything that I'm saying and why it's so pathetic.
I started my PhD and I just felt really stupid. When it came to grad school, especially trying to figure out what I'm doing in my research, it's a lot of reading. And that was a big adjustment. I love to read, but I love to read fiction. I love to read things with a story. If it has a narrative, I'll follow it. Scientific journals do not have a narrative. You have to create it yourself.
I think the greatest fear you face is the first page you write. Until you write that first page, your prose is perfect, your ideas are incredibly well conceptualized, and it's going to be immaculate research. When the first sentence goes down, you begin to see your shortcomings. That's the fear. It's the next 90,000 words.
So it's just getting past that first page? Is that the worst part?
No, every page is like that.
The most terrifying time in my life was when I was in my third year as an assistant professor, untenured. The research was going well, and I had my first child. And I actually had this first child in the US where there's no maternity leave. There's 12 weeks unpaid leave. There's no maternity leave. You can take a bit of sick leave and that's it. You have this research group. You have, at 4 years, you're going to be judged by your peers. And if things haven't been going well, you're asked to leave. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't get any second chance. I was at the third largest chemistry department in the US, and it was the first time they'd ever had to deal with this in their 130-year history. The first time anyone on their faculty had ever been pregnant.
There are risks because, I get hate mail from people that don't like what I've said about stem cell research, don't like how I've responded to the latest Supreme Court of Canada decision. I mean, there are people out there with very strong convictions, and those views are completely legitimate.
I have had some experiences of being interrogated at the border, going across the border, and luckily I was able to sort of overcome the interrogation to get into the United States. But there's always that anxiety that perhaps you're not going to be accepted into the community that you're criticizing.
Having the courage to make it new is not a small thing. I think that it does take daring to discover. We have all sorts of romantic figures in our past. We think of Luther throwing his inkpot at the devil for the independence of his mind. I think of Virginia Woolf doing that as a writing woman. You are a woman, you're supposed to be writing deferentially, reviewing this book deferentially, and she says she threw the inkpot at that angel in the house who was tempting her to be conventional and submissive. I think it's easy to say the same thing. It's different to find something new to say, because thinking is hard. thinking and creating are hard work.
The university is not, in fact, a place of great risk. It's a place of great intellectual comfort. That is what is most dangerous to us, to be too comfortable with what it is that we think we know, too comfortable with what we have already achieved, too little interested in the way that other people see the world, what our issues are. We need to remember that our issues are not everybody's issues, and that's a harder thing to do.